Hello, this is Michel Leviathan Sorbet and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Today a review of a game which will be set during my favorite topic in history, during the Indochina War. This will be the review of The Lost Valley, The Siege of Dien Biên Phủ, published in 2020 by White Dog Games. This is a game by Jacques Rabier for one player, so for solitaire play. The time of play will be somewhere around 2 hours and the minimum age of the player will be 14 or higher. This is a game which will cover the most climatic, the most important battle during the Indochina War, the Battle of Dien Biên Phủ. This battle, fought between the 13th of March 1954 and the 7th of May of the same year, was a smashing Vietnamese victory. It ended in a total destruction of the French garrison in Dien Bien Phu, and it led also to the partition of Vietnam, decided during the Geneva Conference, started one day after the fall of the camp on the 8th May of 1954. This game is a game which I really wanted to try because, as I said earlier, I like the Indochina War theme. I like the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Those are my favorite topics. I own several games, I own several books covering this war, covering this battle, and I am always taking a closer look, and I am always taking pleasure in playing games which are about this very interesting period of both French as Vietnamese history. So today a presentation of this game. I'll show you how the game looks, then how it works, and at the end I will give you also my final thoughts and my final recommendation concerning this title. Here is The Lost Valley, The Siege of Dien Bien Phu by Jacques Rabier and White Dog Games. At first, I'd like to show you the elements that we will be using while playing this game. The first one will be the playing map, which represents the camp of Dien Bien Phu, as it was in March 1954, just before the battle began. This map is divided into two parts. The first one will be the playing area, on which our playing pieces will be placed, where the French centers of resistance are presented. The second one is at the bottom, where all the important tracks are being printed. The first part, so the part where the battle will take place, represents the different sectors and centers of French resistance. The sectors are divided into three types: the northern sectors, which are Gabriel and Anne-Marie, the central sector where all the other centers of resistance are located, and the southern sector where the sole and only center of resistance is being presented, it's Isabelle. Now, as you can see, the French centers of resistance are located mainly in the central part of the board, because during the real battle the French occupied the bottom of the Dien Bien Phu valley, but they had also some outposts and some strong points at some of the hills surrounding the valley, and those are the most important ones, because some of them were guarding the approaches to the central part of the camp, as well as they protected the airfield. The airfield is located in the central part near the Huguet sector, where also we have a special token indicating the current status of the airstrip. Now, this is a crucial status because this will influence the number of resources which the French will be able to acquire during each turn, or that they will be able to spare. The airstrip can be active, interdicted, it can also be damaged or even become destroyed. Each of those centers of resistance has a certain number printed on it, indicating the number of infantry units that can be present at any one given time in such a sector. The second number indicates the number of other assets apart from infantry which can be present in such a center of resistance. So stacking in this game is an important factor. Each of those centers has also a star or sometimes 2 stars, indicating the number of morale points that we can lose if losing such a sector to the enemy. Some of those sectors have also some additional symbols, such as the anti-aircraft artillery, or the airfield sector or the airfield symbol. All of them will additionally increase the strength of the Vietnamese, increasing their anti-aircraft capacities or the strength of the division taking the sector. All they will influence the probability of hitting and destroying the airfield. Those sectors are connected one to another through 2 types of connections. The black ones will be used by the French and indicate that those sectors are next one to another. They will enable movement between those centers. The colored ones will be used by the Vietnamese divisions because the camp will be attacked by 4 different Vietnamese divisions. The 308th division will be the green one, the 312th the blue one, the red one is the 316th, and finally the one attacking Isabel will be the orange one. As you can see, those starting points will connect such a starting area to one center of resistance, which will be the first target of each division. But after taking such a strong point, then additional strong points can be attacked following the lines printed on the map. All those connections are moving towards the final Vietnamese objective, which is the headquarters of Colonel then General Christian de Castries. This is the PC Gono, which is the most important spot on the entire map for the French. We have to defend this center at all costs, because if we lose the control of such a sector, if it is taken by the Vietnamese, we automatically lose the game. Each zone, each center of resistance has also a spot where we will be placing the current fortifications status. Now, each such place can have a token indicating the level of fortifications from 0 to 4, which is the highest. But those levels will change during the game because Vietnamese will actively try to destroy those fortifications, whereas the French will try to increase their efficiency. The bottom part of the map, as I said earlier, has some additional tracks which will be used to record important information during the game. We have a turn record track on which we will be moving the game turn marker, where we have also some additional French reinforcements placed on turns during which they will enter the game. We have a sitrep diagram track, which is a combination of the current morale and resources possessed by the French during the battle, which will grant a positive or a negative modifier during the game. We have a long Viet Minh division strength record track on which 4 tokens, each corresponding to one of the 4 divisions, will be moved, indicating the current strength of a division and their status, because each division can be active or inactive when it takes bigger losses. We have tracks showing French morale, French resource points, the current level of anti-aircraft artillery of the Vietnamese, and also a track on which we will be indicating the number of action points or air support points possessed by the French. Finally, we have also some additional boxes where we will be holding French two steps eliminated units. Those units can be transferred to French permanently eliminated units in order to place Bataillon de Marche tokens on the map, which indicates some ad hoc formations created by survivors from destroyed units. So to some extent, the French will be able to recreate some of their lost units. When we speak of units, we have two types of units in the game. We have infantry units and assets, which are additionally divided into armor units and artillery. Each unit can have up to two steps, which is indicated on such a counter. It has also the designation of the center of resistance on which such a unit starts the game. It has three parameters. It has an attack strength, a defense strength, and a morale factor. Those levels can decrease if the unit takes a hit and it is reduced. We have, as I said earlier, also artillery units, which again have one step but the same three different parameters. We have armor units because the French used armor units during the battle. They had M4 Chaffe's detachments in the valley and they used them very efficiently during the whole battle. We have also mortar units, but they all work pretty much the same. Artillery will be used in order to support both defense and attacks during the game. We have additional markers. We have, for instance, control markers, which will be placed on sectors which are under Vietnamese control. We have disruption tokens because the French units can become disrupted due to enemy fire or due to enemy activity. And finally, we receive also a very important element, which is a deck of cards. This is the event deck from which we will be drawing one card per turn. Those cards, as you can see, have a picture on the background. Each card has its own name. It has also a certain amount of action points which will be granted to the French player. We have also some preconditions when the card can be played. We have also the instruction, and finally we have also a small part of a flag on the bottom corner indicating if this is a card which will benefit the French or the Viet Minh. Those are the Viet Minh cards, and for instance here is a card which will grant us some benefits because it has the French flag. And those are pretty it, all the elements which we will be using on the board and next to the board. Apart from that, we received the rulebook and some player aids. Two of them are very important. The first one is player aid F because it has the two possible scenarios. We have the campaign game scenario, which will enable us to play a 16-turn game, and the 5 hills scenario, so the battle for Dominiques and Alliance, which starts on turn 5, which is a shorter 12-turn game. Each of those scenarios indicates which units are to be placed where to place all the additional counters, how to prepare also the event deck. The second player aid card is something which we will be using very often during the game, which in fact will be one of the only things that you will be using during each turn apart from the elements on the board, because it is a player aid which not only has the abbreviated sequence of play but also each of the tables that is used during each of the phases. So it is extremely useful. I will show you it in a few moments again. Now that's it when it comes to the components of the Lost Valley. Now I'd like to explain briefly how the game works. The objective of the game when playing the Lost Valley, the Siege of Dien Bien Phu, will be to survive the siege up to turn 16. If we manage to do so, and if at the same time we manage to protect PC Gono, so our headquarters, if we manage to avoid dropping our morale level to below 1, and if we avoid dropping our resource points below 1, we can count the victory points. If any of those aforementioned things happen, we lose the game automatically. At the game's end, we verify how many victory points we still have. Those victory points are being calculated based on the number of strong points that are still under French control and on the number of two-step units that we still have on the board. Each initially two-step units which still remains but as a one-step unit grants us half a point. Based on the total number of points, we can see how we managed. Did we score an operational victory, a tactical victory? Did we score a draw? Or maybe have we lost, just as the French did historically? Now, each turn of the Lost Valley is being played using the same sequence of play. Some exceptions concern the first turn. During the French cannot use support of their artillery in order to defend Gabriel and Beatrice, who are under Vietnamese attack. But apart from that, all the overturns are pretty much the same. In order to play a full turn of the Lost Valley, we will be using the abbreviated sequence of play, which describes in a very precise way how to proceed. The first thing is the French logistics phase, during which we will always draw the top card from the event deck. And those cards will always tell us when they can be played. For instance, this one, Việt Minh reinforcements, will be implemented only if it is turn 13 to 16. If we, for instance, draw this card during turn 7, this card will not be played because the trigger will not happen. But if it is triggered, we will implement the instruction on such a card. Apart from that, each card has also a certain number from 1 to 4 on the top right corner of the card, indicating us the number of action points that such a card will give us during the current turn. So after implementing the event, after keeping the card, if we can keep such a card, some cards can be kept, we increase our current number of action points, which are tracked on the bottom part of the playing area. After implementing the event, after adding the number of action points, we pass to the first phase, which is described on the second side of the player aid card, which is the French air support points availability. We will roll the dice for the first time during the turn. After rolling our dice and implementing an additional modifier due to the current level of the Vietnamese anti-aircraft activity, we will see how many number of additional air support points we receive. Those points can be immediately used in order to fly two types of missions. Those missions can target Vietnamese anti-aircraft artillery, or they can target Vietnamese divisions. Now, those are resolved in the same way using dice rolls and reducing the result by the current number of Vietnamese anti-aircraft artillery. And the effect of such an aircraft mission can be the decrease of the current anti-aircraft level, or the reduction of the current strength of the division which was targeted by our mission. So this is also a way to reduce both of those elements. After flying those missions, we verify the status of our airstrip. Again, we roll dice and we verify the current status of the airstrip, which can become destroyed, damaged, interdicted, or it can not change from the previous turn. Destroying the airstrip means that it will remain destroyed for the entire game. Damaging it means that it is unavailable, but we still can repair it. After doing those things, we pass to the next phase, which will be the French resource point adjustment phase. During this phase, we will again roll dice, we will use some modifiers, and we will see how our resource points change. At most times, those points will be reduced, sometimes they can even increase. So after rolling those dice, applying all the modifiers, the resource points marker will be moved alongside the corresponding track. Then we pass to the Viet Minh logistics phase, during which we will firstly increase the strength of some of the Vietnamese divisions. This increase will concern only the Vietnamese divisions which are currently inactive, because as I said earlier, so divisions can have two different statuses. They can be inactive or active. If they are inactive, we increase the strength by 2 or by 1 depending on the turn, and if their strength after such an adjustment becomes bigger than 8, higher than 8, they automatically become active. If their strength is less than 8, they are still shaken and they are still inactive, and in order to become active they have to pass a special check which can make them active. If they fail this check, they remain inactive and they won't be launching an assault during the current turn. Divisions 304 and 316 are inactive at the game's start, and during the first few turns we will be testing if they become active. We will be rolling dice, we will be checking if the result is higher than the current turns number. If it is higher, they remain inactive. If it is smaller, they will become active and they will also start attacking French positions. After all those adjustments, so after adding strength, after changing the status of Vietnamese divisions, those divisions will try to decrease the defensive potential of the French centers of resistance which are next to their starting points. In order to do this, we will be using the Viet Minh sapping table, which will again require us to roll dice, and based on the result obtained, we will reduce the current defense factor of those centers of resistance which were targeted by the Viet Minh. After such attempts, all Vietnamese active divisions will launch their assaults. The assaults will be always launched against only one center of resistance by each division, so up to 4 assaults can be played during each turn, and always the sector with the smallest defense factor will be attacked. Of course, the sector which is next to another sector controlled by the same division. An assault is resolved in such a way that we firstly make a dice roll using the upper table, where we will use some additional modifiers based on the number of units and their defense factors in the attacked sector, based on the fortification level, based on the current sitrep diagram level, based also on potential artillery support or air support if we decided to keep our air points in order to support our defense. Then from this result we will subtract the current Viet Minh division strength, and the final result indicates a certain DRM both for the French and for the Viet Minh. Using those two modifiers, we will again roll dice on 2 different tables, indicating the number of casualties and losses sustained by the French and by the Viet Minh divisions. The losses by the Viet Minh divisions are simple because we just reduce the strength of those divisions on the corresponding track. When it comes to French losses, we will reduce units, we will eliminate units based on the result obtained. Sometimes we will have to retreat, leaving the defended sector. Sometimes our units will also become disrupted. If after such an exchange a position is left without infantry and ammo units, it is overrun by the Viet Minh and it is automatically controlled by the Vietnamese. Additionally, its fortifications level is automatically reduced to 1, and such a position becomes controlled by the Viet Minh. Additionally, we always lose a certain amount of morale based on the number of stars on the position lost, and we can also be additionally hindered by the increase of the anti-aircraft level of the Viet Minh or the force of the attacking division, or we can receive a negative modifier to the roll to the airstrip status to the status of our airstrip. So it is always important to defend closely the sectors which can grant the enemy the biggest benefits. After resolving all assaults, we pass to the French phase, during which we can try to respond to the Vietnamese activities by placing reinforcements on the board if they happen to arrive, by moving units, by launching our own assaults, by making raids, by repairing the airstrip, by repairing fortifications. But all those things require us to spend both action points and resources. So this is the moment when we have to carefully decide how to use our action points. For instance, if we have only one action point during a turn, we will not be able to move and to assault. We will not be able to launch raids. We have to choose something. If we have more than 1 point, for instance 3 points, we can decide to move our units, to support our units during defense. We can also use them to initiate assaults or maybe to make raids, so we have more options. But if we are reduced both in terms of action points and resource points, we will have to choose only one of those options. Now, counterattacks are pretty much similar. We again use some additional modifiers. We check for firstly for some DRMs, then we roll onto different tables. Raids are resolved on a different table. They are primarily meant to restore the level of our fortifications, whereas additional activity such as fortification repairs or repairing the airstrip will require us to spend resource points. At the end of each turn, we can try also to recover our disrupted units. In order to do this, we will try to pass a morale test, which is again resolved with dice, adding the current morale of our unit, and we try to obtain a result of 8 or higher. After this, we end the current turn and we play a new one, starting by drawing a new event card. This is pretty it, how a turn of the Lost Valley, the Siege of Dien Bien Phu, looks like. This is pretty it when it comes to the basic elements, the basic mechanics of this game. Now I invite you to my final thoughts. I'd like to tell you what I think about this game, what are my feelings after playing it several times, what I think are its strong but also weaker points. The Lost Valley, the Siege of Dien Bien Phu, is a game that I really wanted to play. As I said a few moments ago, I'm a huge fan of the Indochina War. I own several games, several books which are focusing on this war and on the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And I'm always taking a look at games which are covering this subject. When I first knew that White Dog Games were publishing a game about this battle, I instantly wanted to buy it. It was possible to buy a print and play copy, but I decided to wait and to order the full game printed by the company. And I must say that I really like the quality what I finally received. So looking for strong points of this title, the first one would be without any doubt the quality of the components that you receive inside the box of the Lost Valley. I love the cards, they are of a high quality, they have photographs of the epoch, they have a full ton of chrome concerning the battle with a lot of details, a lot of things which for people who know a lot about the battle, know a lot about Dien Bien Phu, are something extremely interesting. I like also the player aids. I think that the player aid on which you have both the turn sequence as well as all the tables which are used during the different phases is one of the best that I have ever seen in a war game. you can use it and play through the entire turn using only this one player aid. Of course, you will have to search for some details in the rulebook if you have some doubts, but when you know the rules, when you start playing, this player aid might be sufficient in order to play the entire game. When you know the rules quite well, you will not be using the rulebook at all. So this is one of the best player aids that I have ever seen. The third part is the playing map. Now, I'm not a great fan of the artwork because I think it's not the best artwork that I have seen, but this game map is extremely functional. You have everything that you need on it. The centers of resistance are of a sufficient size. You have space for counters concerning fortification level, concerning control. You have places where to store your active, your used units. You have the connections between the different centers of resistance. You have the drop zones, and additionally you have all the tracks that you need on the bottom part of this map. So this is very functional, and looking at those tracks, they are well thought, they are well represented. At a quick glance, you can see what is the status, for instance, of your resource points, of your morale, and how this influences your C-trap roll. So you've got everything. The thing that I really like in this game, and which I think is one of its landmarks, is its climate, because it's a game with full of details, with full of chrome. This is such a climatic title. I'm really loving it. I always have high expectations when it comes to Indochina games, when it comes to Dien Biên Phủ games, but this one is excellent. I like the theme, I like the way how the game simulates how the battle evolved. And looking at your centers of resistance falling one after another, looking at your elite units wiped out due to Vietnamese attacks, looking at your resource points disappear, looking at your morale plummeting, looking at your air support unable to diminish the Vietnamese power, you have the feeling that you are inside this battle. You see that the game takes you through a journey, shows you how the battle evolved, really nicely simulating how the Battle of Dien Bien Phu looked in history. And I think that this is one of the most important strong points of this game. It simulates very accurately all the elements that were part of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. A small hiccup concerns the initial turn, because you have some rules governing the first turn, during which there are some exceptions. You cannot support your units thanks to artillery. You cannot support your units using air support during the first initial Vietnamese assaults against Beatrice and Gabrielle. It wasn't the case historically. Those two centers of resistance were heavily supported by French artillery. French artillery was extremely active at the beginning of the battle. They tried counter-battery missions, they tried close support missions. They were very, very active during those two evenings. So putting this rule inside the rules is somewhat a way to make those two centers of resistance fall during the initial turn, not to simulate how those assaults looked like in reality. So this is the sole and only issue that I have with the rules versus how the game looks. The rules versus how the battle looked in reality. Apart from that, you have really a lot of small rules, really a lot of chrome which are inside the game. Not very complicated rules, very simple ones, but making you think of the battle instantly. So you have sapping rules governing trenches, approach trenches, which were very actively very actively constructed by the Vietnamese during the battle. You have the rules concerning the airstrip, the interdiction, or maybe destruction. And playing the game very often, my airstrip was destroyed somewhere the same time with when it historically was unable to enable planes landing. The last plane landing in Dien Bien Phu was a Dakota Evasan on the 28th of March, so 15 days after the start of the battle. But in fact, most landings at the end of this period were all of them were landings by Dakotas trying to pick up wounded soldiers, but only 10% of those landings succeeded because of enemy anti-aircraft fire or bad weather. So this is a nice way how to include in the game some small elements which make you instantly think of the battle. And looking at how the French situation deteriorates through the game also is a way to nicely simulate how the battle evolved, starting from all the strong points prepared for battle with huge reserves of resources, with high morale. You start observing how those elements deteriorate, and each turn becomes more complicated in terms of defending all this shrinking perimeter during the battle. I like it. I think it's historically accurate. I think it's climatic. It's extremely well done. So this game is also a game which will lead you to dramatic conclusions. You sometimes will be wondering, am I able to defend one more turn? From where should I take my forces in order to defend Elian? How to use my resource points? Will I have enough in order to survive one more turn? Will I be able to launch a raid? Will I be able to launch a counterattack? What about my morale? Will there be any air support during this turn? Those are agonizing moments. Those are very difficult decisions to make, and all of them make this game very dramatic. And at the finale, you have the feeling that you have lived through a very difficult period, that you have fought a very difficult battle. I like it very much. I said also that the game has a fantastic flow. You grab the player aid sheet and you play through the different tables, through the different phases. It's quick, it's logical, it's easy to understand, it's easy to implement. I don't see how this playing aid could have been done better, maybe with the sole exception that I have seen some complaints that the font is too small. In my opinion, it's adequate, it's okay, but if it was a little bit bigger, well, I think this wouldn't be a two-sided player aid sheet. It should be a it would be a player aid composed of 4 sheets. It would be less practical to use. So what I think are the weaker points of the Lost Valley, the Siege of Dien Bien Phu, or aren't there any? Well, the first one is strictly technical, is a detail concerning the map. I said a few moments ago that the map is extremely functional and that you have everything that you need on it. Apart from one thing, there is a connection missing between Isabelle and Claudine. It was omitted, and I do not see how that was possible. It's absolutely impossible to omit such a crucial information. Fortunately, you have the information somewhere in the rulebook that those 2 centers of resistance are connected, but you have to know it, you have to remember it during gameplay. You do not have this connection on the map. This is a huge mistake. It shouldn't happen. The second thing is related to the mechanic of the game. Well, this game is all about dice rolling, and you will be rolling really a lot. It's just possible to look at the structure of the turn at the different tables and you instantly know that you will be rolling and rolling dice once and again. You have tons of modifiers for certain rolls, you have less for other ones, but in every single phase, almost every single phase, apart maybe from drawing cards, you will be rolling dice. And this might be a problem for people who do not like games in which you have a lot of dice rolling. If you are allergic to dice rolling, the Lost Valley, the Siege of Dien Bien Phu, will make you red, because you will be rolling really a lot. And here an interesting thing. We have in the rules some levels of victory indicated, and I really can't see how playing the French you can achieve total strategical victory, ending the game with 20 or so points, victory points. In my opinion, it's impossible. In my opinion, it is something highly hypothetical, which can be achieved only if you manage to consistently roll 10 or higher during every single die roll during the game. And I don't think it's possible. Statistics say it's impossible, because you would have to obtain consistently very high results in order to avoid losses, in order to reduce enemy division strength, in order to not have your airstrip closed, in order to not lose your units during defense. There are such many ifs, and the probability is such low that in my opinion it's just impossible. So you might wonder at the game's end, how is it possible to obtain such a result? Well, the answer in my opinion is it's impossible. It's statistically very improbable, and it only is there in order to show you that in theory it would be achievable. And you might say that this game is all just about dice rolling, it's a question of luck. Well, yes and no. Firstly, yes, because sometimes you'll have absolutely no, you'll have zero influence on the outcome of those rolls. You, for instance, will roll for your airstrip status, and you have absolutely no influence on the outcome. If you roll 2 1s, your airstrip is instantly destroyed, and you have nothing to say about it. Of course, you can defend the centers of resistance which grant the Vietnamese additional die roll modifiers, but to be sincere, retaking Gabrielle and Beatrice and controlling them up to the game's end, well, it's science fiction. It's absolutely impossible. Or it is really something which requires you to roll extremely lucky during the entire game. So sometimes those dice rolls will be extremely unlucky. You have the maximum number of units on a center of resistance, and you roll a 1 when it comes to your losses. You have to lose a huge amount of very powerful units with high morale. So you'll lose victory points, you lose very precious two-stepped units, you'll lose your center of resistance. Well, did you have any chance to influence this die roll? Well, not very much. So sometimes you'll have the feeling that those die rolls are really a game changer, that they finally sculpt the outcome of the game. And it's only a part of the story, because the second one, an intriguing one, is that those die rolls, those dice rolls, due to those statistics that I already mentioned earlier, due to the probability of obtaining some results, enable you to simulate how the battle went. And this is something ambiguous, because this is a game using this dice rolling mechanic, which in my opinion extremely is implemented in such a way that it enables to extremely well simulate how the battle went, because those die rolls at the game's end will be somewhere between the bad ones and the good ones, because that's how probability works, that's how statistics works. Of course, sometimes you'll get more unlucky rolls, sometimes you'll get more lucky rolls, but due to the fact that while the situation degrades and deteriorates for the French, you'll have less positive modifiers, you will be having more negative modifiers. So at the game start, you'll be beginning with a much higher probability of obtaining better results than at the game's end. And at the game's end, you'll have the feeling that you had much more influence on what was happening at the game start and a lot less at the game's end. And this is how the battle went. This is how the Battle of Dien Bien Phu evolved. When the French had more manpower, when they had less wounded inside their hospitals, when they had more shells, when they had more air support, they were more active, they had more chances of repulsing additional Vietnamese human waves. They had resources to launch counterattacks, to actively destroy approach trenches. But at some point they were already doomed, and they fought because honor demanded that they did so. And this mechanic, this dice rolling mechanic, simulates how the battle went. So this is one of the few examples in wargaming where this big randomness, which is brought to the game because of using die rolling mechanics, is in place in such a way that it helps to simulate how the battle evolved. I like it, I really like it. It's random, but it's dramatic, it's climatic, it accurately shows how the battle went, even though it uses a random generator in the form of a lot of dice rolling. So concluding, The Lost Valley, The Siege of Dien Bien Phu is an extremely good solitaire game depicting a very climatic, very important battle fought after World War II in Indochina. It is a game in which you will be really rolling a lot of dice, but using extremely functional elements, using an extremely well prepared player aid, and at the same time having to consistently make very difficult decisions. You'll have to not only take care of your resource points, but also of your action points. You'll have to use your assets in terms of infantry, elite units, artillery, and always you'll have the feeling that you would like to do more than you can because you do not have enough resource points or manpower to do all that you would like to do. So this is a game extremely well simulating how the Battle of Dien Bien Phu went, a game quick to learn, a game quite quick to play, a game at the same time which very often will end with the same outcome that it really went during the battle. So you'll be overwhelmed by the Vietnamese forces, or sometimes occasionally you will be able to achieve victory, marginal victory at the game's end after a very dramatic, very climatic battle. If you're searching for an interesting game covering this period, The Lost Valley, The Siege of Dien Bien Phu might be an excellent choice, especially if you like this subject. This was the review of The Lost Valley, The Siege of Dien Bien Phu by White Dog Games. Thank you a lot for watching this review. Take also a look at our other videos. I invite you also to our Facebook and Instagram accounts, and if you want to support Wojennik TV, you can check our Patronite account and become one of our supporters. I wish you a fantastic day and see you next time.